Hi and welcome to the latest instalment of Classic Talk. As you can see, the ZA is finally home, bringing an end to 6 years of work to get the car back on the road. But we won't talk about that this week. We've got Steph back from idriveaclassic, who's going to talk to us about her love for all things British cars, what it's like driving a claptop Metro as your first car, and why it's really important to preserve social history.
Classic Talk.
I'm glad you touched on the British car scene as well, because a lot of your heroes seem to be like the BMC, the British Leyland type. What is it that draws you to British cars in particular?
It's probably because I know what to do with an A series, and I think, well, can't really deviate past that now. Like, I've got all the parts in the garage, so if something goes wrong, I can just pull it off one onto the next. I don't know, really. It's it's kind of felt like a natural graduation, because I've gone from Morris Minor to Marina, which a lot of people probably would have done back in the day, and also got a Metro. So you probably would have, mum and dad got a bit older, and then they got, Gran essentially got a Metro, so I kind of followed that path through. I just need an Allegro to fill that gap. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's because, again, going back to that friendliness, everybody's been so friendly. And every time I've been really interested in a British car, because I've been to a lot of British car shows, people have been so welcoming and said, why don't you sit in the car? Do you want to take it around the field? Do you want to have a look? And that opens it up. Whereas, I don't know, some of the other stuff I look at, and as well, for British stuff, you can still get a lot of the parts or your engine bits in your day-to-day running. Because I'm running these cars daily. I don't have a modern car, so that I need something that I can get bits for. Whereas some of the stuff, and in fact, I found out recently that you can still buy everything off the shelf for a Lada, which I thought was nuts, because my friends bought one and I said, where are you going to get the parts for that? And he said, honestly, he said they still make them. I thought it was almost like the Morris Minor, I think, of the kind of that Eastern bloc. But yeah, no, it's just such a warm and welcoming car scene, and you can get the parts easily. And for me, the cars are really attractive. And I know that some people really hate Metros and really hate Marinas especially, and love to make the piano joke, which, by the way, for anybody watching, is really boring and none of us want to hear it anymore. And for me, they're just really great cars. I mean, you look at the Marina and it's such a stylish shape. A lot of people are like, oh, it's rubbish. But you look at it, it's such a stylish shape. And then, I could never have afforded a Mini, but that Metro, well, the Metro's got a bit of a sentimental thing for me, because when I was learning to drive, we just seemed to have a series of clapped out Metros out the back of the paper that we churned through. And my first car was a Metro out the back of the paper. And I think for me, it was just a step back in time with that one. But yeah, I love the British car scene. If I had money to buy another one, which I don't, because I'm impoverished because I'm fixing these heaps. If I would probably go and buy, I wouldn't venture too far from the light. I would probably go for an 1800, like a Morris 1800, which of course was Alec Isagonis's favourite creation out of all the cars he made. Or maybe do you know what? I took out that Wolseley 1100, and that was just so perfect in every way. I probably would go for something like that. Even though I do look at things like the Vauxhall Chevette and think, oh, that's cool, or the bubble cars and think, oh, that'd be a laugh to take to Tesco's. But it's what it is, isn't it? So yeah, that's a very long-winded answer to the British car scene thing. But yeah, it's for anybody watching that has considered a British car, you should do it, because the owners clubs and all the community are so kind and so welcoming and so willing to share knowledge, that I think there are no barriers whatsoever to joining in.
It's interesting that I never really got into the British car scene, you see. So my first car was a Beetle, my second car was a Mini, my third car was a Mini, and they were kind of daily drives. We're talking about the mid to late 80s.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily buying a classic; it was just an older car at the time. And I think the Volkswagen thing for me, because I was mainly into those, came from a family. So my grandfather had quite a few Volkswagens. He had a thing called a K70. He had a 412. My mum had a Beetle in the 60s and in the early 70s. So it was a family thing for me. So, I mean, what kind of influences in your family or experience growing up do you think have kind of pushed you towards just keeping British?
Well, I'm a bit of the weird one because I'm the only one in the family that's got a classic car. And in fact, I sent my auntie, she'll probably be watching this, and I sent her a picture of an Allegro and I went, what do you think this is? And she went, is it an MG? I was like, no. Anyway, so what did we have growing up? We had some really interesting cars. So we had your standard 80s Volvo barge for ages. Then we moved on to Cherokee Jeep, Jeep Cherokee. Then what did we have? So then it started getting really interesting. So there was a Kia Sedona, and also an Asia Rockster, which no one's ever heard of, but they're really cool. They're almost like a little Jeepy type thing, if you've ever seen one. And it was in really nice kind of claret red, and it almost felt a bit like somebody had sized up Barbie's car, and it felt like a generic Barbie Jeep type thing.
Yeah.
I loved it.
You know what, Steph? I was looking at those on eBay not so long ago, Asia Rockstars, because I remember them. I remember when they came out, and they always seemed to be that claret red that you mentioned, and the one on eBay I saw was claret red, or they seemed to be like a bottle green color, metallic bottle green color. But they were kind of. I mean, I think they were made in Asia by. I can't remember the name of the company that sort of they came from, but essentially they were a copy of the Jeep, and there were a lot of similarities with the Willys Jeep, but they just rotted away. So sort of they were kind of at the same time they were bringing those into the UK in the mid '90s. There was also an Indian company called Mahindra, and Mahindra brought some. They called it an Indian, and that was a similar kind of thing with a Peugeot engine in. So there was a lot of that Jeep lookalike thing, and I think it was on the back of Jeep themselves coming back to the UK. So you mentioned the Cherokee. I had a Cherokee, but mine was a US import. But the mid '90s, the Cherokee came into the UK, and it was great. But until you started looking at the fuel cost of a 4-litre engine on those things, but no, Asia Rockstars, they're really quirky little things, and if you found one of those for buttons, they're quite an interesting car, I think.
Well, I really wanted it, and I said, when I grow up, when I learn to drive, can I have this? And it was the one car that I was really like, oh yes, love it. And it got to the early 2000s, and so this car wasn't very old because it was an M-Reg. And so what does that make it? So what, 95?
You know what? It's really embarrassing that I'm going to look it up.
No.
Diary.
We've got the same diary.
Right, you can tell distances from all kinds of places and all sorts of. But I shouldn't have to look this up.
95.
Yeah, 95. Yeah.
Such an anorak. Sorry. Yeah. So the Asia Rockster, I said, can I please inherit that? I really want it when I learn to drive. And it got to the early 2000s, and unfortunately you just couldn't get the bits because eBay did it even exist, or was it in its infancy? People didn't really use it like they do now, or Facebook groups and stuff. And I think probably a lot of cars have been lost to that. We can't get the parts for it. And then after that, more sensible choices were made. So there was the Kia Sedona, which was a Mark I, because it was like a new thing to the UK, and we used to really like it because we could swivel the seats around, and you could put your feet on the back seats like a little bed and like roll it down. And for us kids, that was like quite a big thing. And then there was the Land Rover Defender, and then there was the Discovery as well, and then it was just a series of kind of mum runarounds, which were just Metros, just cheap Metros that were a couple of £100, because that's what you did with the Metro, wasn't it? You just ran it into the ground and then got rid of it, because what's the point in replacing it or fixing it? So and then I was learning to drive, and what do you give a 17-year-old who likes to put their foot down? You get a Metro on the case. So there was a few fraught driving lessons with family, and then I went on to an instructor's car, and then when I passed, I was like, right, I'm just going to go for something that I've driven before and I think I can park. And I just ended up with a Rover 114, which was diabolical. It lasted 3 months. I will not tell you what top speed I got out of it, but it was amazing. And then it went for its MOT. So I bought it in February. It went for its MOT in the June. And the MOT tester came back with 3 sheets and said, these are all the things that is wrong with this car. And it's like, so do we fix it? And he's like, you don't fix this car. You do not fix this car. He said, there's no seatbelt anchorages, there's no floor, the exhaust is half hanging off, it's got no brakes, no handbrake. I was like, okay. Okay. And then after that, I went to a dealership and bought my next car, which is my Morris Minor I've still got, because I thought I'd rather spend a bit more money and not mess about with this whole replace your car every 12 months. It's silly. So yeah, there you go. That's kind of the and then Morris Minors have led to marinas and metros, so all downhill from there, really, I suppose.
When we touched on before as well the nature of clubs as well, and you said about the ones that have really good youth setups, do you think the onus is sort of on clubs now to sort of prolong the life of this sort of the classic car enthusiasm, because obviously the generations coming up are the ones who are going to carry that on? Or do you reckon?
Absolutely. If you've got one of these cars, you're not just the owner, you're also the custodian. And I think that if you have an older car, you should take it really seriously to make sure that you're not only, because I really hate people that bodge cars. In fact, I'm not going to say which of my cars it is, but I'm actually sorting bodges on it at the moment, and I'm furious about it because I haven't done it. And it's, in my opinion, the onus is on you as the owner and as part of and to get involved with your club as well, to keep the cars that are still available going and in a good state, and to also get young people interested, because young people now, so when I got into cars, like back when black and white telly was on, because I am old, you thought of a classic as a 50s or a 60s car, maybe 70s, but 70s was a bit new. But nowadays kids are going for like 90s, early 2000s, and they're like, oh yeah, it's a classic. I'm like, no, it's not. And I guess that's kind of like when I was younger and thought that 70s or 80s car was a bit of a classic, and people that were like one generation up from me were like, no, they're bangers. And I think that I'm now that older generation that goes, no, an early 2000s car is not a classic. That is just an old car. But with that, I think it's really important that owners clubs and owners themselves, because I think some people can be very standoffish at shows, which was something I encountered when I was very young. You know, you've got people that be like, yeah, it's my car. Yeah. What do you want to know? And actually, I think you should, if kids want to have a look, get them in the car, talk to them about it, because you might spark that child's interest. And I think there's so much more value. And oh my God, I'm going to go off on one, so I'll keep it brief. I think that it's not just about keeping the cars going as well, it's about keeping that car community going, because it's a lot easier, especially for kids nowadays, to sit at home, log on a computer and just connect to a video game, whereas cars aren't just cars getting you from A to B, it's you get that whole community as well. And so I think that it's on everybody who has a classic car to invite more people, be more welcoming, see somebody standing on their own at a show, get them involved, talk to them, because even if they feel a bit like, oh God, wish that person hadn't spoken to me because I'm shy, you are presenting a really positive face for the world of classic cars. And I'm always talking to people at petrol stations, boring people to death about the Marina being the best-selling car of 1973. But the point is you've got to get people interested and get people excited, because my friend has just fostered a little boy, and he turned up and his interest in cars was kind of there, but now he's like, oh yeah, I want a classic car and I want to do this. And it's like just that bit of enthusiasm and shared time and using that car and being considerate of the future, you can get more people involved. So I don't think it's just on the clubs, I think it's on people as well to make sure that it's an accessible world for future generations.
Do we need classic cars, Steph? What do you say, about the future when everybody's being pushed towards electric vehicles and everything else? I mean, for me, I think we do, because there's social history and all that kind of thing, and just exactly what you're talking about with the community aspect. But what do we say? How do we keep these things going? Do you think we're going to be limited in our use of classic cars in the future?
No, I don't. I honestly don't. I think we seem to keep slipping through the net with classic cars, and I think as well that in a world where a lot of people are really, really lonely, and that we're losing more and more places to connect with people. So like, for example, if we go back like 40, 50 years, you've got dance halls and you've got all those sorts of places to meet people. Honestly, before I got a classic car, I was a little bit shy, and I know it's ridiculous to say, and I didn't have a massive group of friends, and I was a bit kind of, I didn't really have a massive circle. But having a classic car has given me that. And it's not just about, do we need classic cars? Yes, we do, because it's a fantastic bit of history, and if we lose our history, then more fool us, because we seem to be losing history left, right and centre, where people don't keep books, people don't value furniture, all that sort of stuff just seems to be disregarded. Well, we need to start looking after our history, because in 100 years' time, people shouldn't just be looking back and thinking, oh, there's, a bit here and there in a dusty museum. Like, bring history to life and bring it out with you and enjoy it, appreciate it. And I think that if we give respect to that car history, it will fall in line that other people in the world will give respect to it as well, because we're tearing stuff down. A really good example is if we've just torn Longbridge down with barely a peep, like, but if you go abroad, you don't see that sort of thing happen. People preserve stuff to look round. And so classic cars are definitely important, and definitely something we need to hang on to.